Hello, everyone, and welcome to our LinkedIn Live. I'm coming in via my phone. We had some technical issues this morning, but so good to see all of you. Larry, thank you so much for being here. It's great to see you.
Hi, Laura. I'm excited to be here. Thanks again for inviting me.
I'm so glad that you're here. And so for everybody who's joining, if you wouldn't mind, go ahead, just as we always do, type in where you're coming from in the comment section here. And if we can get that printed out so that I can see that, since I'm not able to see the comments on my phone, that would be great. And Larry, where are you coming from?
I'm actually dialing in from the San Francisco Bay Area. So greetings from California to everybody.
And that's where I'm coming from as well. So nice that we're both coming in from the Bay Area, from the San Francisco area. So today, and it looks like we've got somebody coming in from North Dakota, from Windermere, North Dakota. Great to have people coming in, somebody coming in from Fort Worth, Texas. Welcome. We've got somebody coming in from Salt Lake City. Good to get all these people. Oh, we've got somebody coming in from Paris, France. So
good evening to
bienvenue. Also from Oregon. So welcome everybody. And just as we always do, please be sure to share your comments, ask questions along the way. I think you're going to love hearing from Larry today, not only because of the work that he does, but because of who he is as a human being. And Larry, I've been wanting to interview you for the longest time. So I'm so excited to finally be able to have you as my guest here today. So thanks again for joining. So our topic today is talking about this idea of designing nudges and cues. So nudges are environmental prompts and cues are cultural prompts. And this is all around how do we make the healthy choice, the easy choice, and also the normal choice. So this is just kind of the way we do business. So Larry, you are, first and foremost, I love how you describe on your larrygreen.com site that you are a servant leader, first and foremost. You are a relationship builder, and you're a lifelong learner. I love those three descriptors. And I just want to pause to have you talk a little bit about introducing yourself as a human being first, and then I'll fill in some of the gaps around who you are on a professional level.
Yeah, well, thanks for that, Laura. One quick edit. Website is larrygreen.info, just for those that are watching. But
oh, sorry, but okay, thank you for that.
No worries, no worries. But yeah, just with that, I try to approach life in that way. Relationships is a big thing for me. Relationships with family, friends, colleagues, all the different circles that can come with that. And then, yeah, lifelong learning and servant leadership. I personally believe that life is a journey. It's an adventure, and there are a number of things that you can engage in. And with that, as you engage in life, finding your true, authentic self, what's the best way that you can show up in life and with others in a way that is true to yourself and can impact others in a positive way. And then with servant leadership, and we're probably going to get more into this here later on in our conversation, but I just try to just go with the mantra of serving others first. What can I do within my power, abilities, skills to just help set the atmosphere so others can be successful? And through that, I believe that, my needs or objectives can get met with that approach.
And it's interesting that balance of kind of being true to ourselves and at the same time really putting others first. And I think what's interesting about being ourselves is that we actually allow others to be themselves. We kind of show the way.
Exactly. Giving space so that others can thrive, not necessarily pushing a particular point of view, respecting different points of view. You don't necessarily have to agree or align with, but allowing those things to have their space as well. Yep.
And, another thing that, in addition to really, again, finding that balance between being ourselves, but also putting others first, and is you and I both share coming from the Southeast. I'm from Chapel Hill, North Carolina. You're coming from Charlottesville, Virginia.
Wahoo,
and I'm sorry.
Wahoo wah to all the Virginia Cavalier fans that are out there. They know what that
Exactly.
means.
So, in addition to that, you are the global program manager at Google, and you also lead the Google Vitality Lab, and that's how you and I originally got to meet each other. So, anything else that you want to share here about your story, Larry, before we dive in?
Yeah, just really quick, just with what I do at Google for our listeners. As a global program manager here, I work in our health and well-being domain or division within Google. And within that, I do a few different things. One thing I do is working with our different colleagues and partners to bring all of our different health and well-being amenities to life. So we have a whole network of gyms. You can get a massage on site, a bunch of different well-being spaces, as well as different communities. And so our group really helps to bring those experiences to life. Along with that, as you mentioned, with the Vitality Lab, and for those that are listening, that's basically a convening or a collection of different thought leaders in the space of well-being. And this is where we just look to learn from each other, as well as explore and perhaps begin to influence the industry when it comes to holistic health and how that can enable the business. And so those are some things, just a little bit more for our listeners around what I do.
Yeah, and I mean, one of the things that we have to always remind ourselves around leveraging every workplace to promote better health and well-being is that well-being at work is not only good for people, but oh, by the way, it's also really good for the bottom line, and it is essential for building a high-performing team. And I know that that's something that's really front and center for you, and for the work that you and your team are doing at Google is really helping to bridge that connection between well-being, again, good for people, but also good for the bottom line, and really an essential element to building these high performing teams. So let's talk a little bit about nudges and cues. And this is something that Google has really been on the forefront of this for a long time. But talk with me about what are your thoughts around how you would define this idea of designing nudges and cues to make the healthy choice, the easy choice, and the normal choice?
Yeah, so I really enjoyed reading your book, and actually I wanted to show it here for our listeners. If you haven't got it, it's a really good thing, so definitely check it out for everybody that's watching. But when it comes to nudges and cues, I think about it in this way. A nudge is setting the space, and setting the space can be literally a physical space of arranging different things, or a virtual or digital space like the medium that we're in right now, or even a relational space, like how the touch points and connections work as you're doing that. So that's how I think about nudges. And then cues, I think about cues in this way, and that's setting the example. So either modeling or demonstrating the different desired behaviors or mindsets or actions to achieve a particular outcome or strategy of what you're trying to do.
And that really ties to the importance of those leaders and particularly managers around modeling whatever the behavior it is that you're hoping to achieve. So let's talk now, before we get into talking about what Google has been doing in this. I want to talk a little bit about how you do your work. And I mean, I know you take inspiration from people like Bruce Lee, but you think a lot about designing nudges and cues for yourself. So tell us a little bit about that and how we might learn from that, and how we could apply this concept of nudges and cues in our lives as well.
Yeah, so it's interesting. When I was reading the chapter in the book that gets into that with nudges and cues, I was reflecting and I was like, yeah, this is actually something that I pulled from the military. So for our listeners, excuse me, I used to be in the Navy for 5.5 years. And so a number of just different practices and behaviors in that context I use today, as well as the sports world, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But within that, I created this user manuals, which I call it, and I have it parked on my website for those that want to check it out. But it's basically just a simple set of slides that just describe how I work and how I work with others and what's the best way to engage with me. Because within my work context, I engage with a lot of different people. We do different projects, and so you're interacting with people in a number of different ways. And the quickest way to be able to, get connected and get in sync, I thought to just create this user manual. So within the user manual, a couple things that I do that gets into nudges and cues is something around how I arrange my calendar. So within my type of work, I like to block off time for different types of work. So deep thinking, I leave open spaces for meetings, stuff like that. That's a different type of work. I also set aside time for email. I don't surf on email all day. I try to set aside certain times during the day. And so that way, if my day is segmented in that way as much as I can, then I can strategically touch base on the different topics or things or projects that I'm involved with. Now, as I say all that, life's busy here, just like I'm sure it is with everybody else. There are some days where it's just crazy and that plan can get blown up. But the idea is that that should be more of the exception as opposed to the norm. And so on a day-to-day basis, I try to arrange my time in that way. I fill in my deep thinking work time with different topics of whatever's top of mind. And then another thing that I do is within meetings, I have this digital notebook, and that's where I take notes on whatever it is, the meeting that's going on before my day begins. I call it my pregame time, and that's where I look at my calendar and I prepare myself for my different upcoming meetings. So certain meetings I'm either running, and so I got to show up in a particular way. Other meetings, it's more of a sit back and take the information in, or come ready to contribute. And so in my little notebook, I'll have my little, references or notes right there at my fingertips. And so that way I'm present and ready to give my best whenever the meeting happens. So those are a couple of examples of what I do.
And we got a comment here. Love that you have your Myers-Briggs profile there. That's
Oh,
so
there we
helpful
go.
to get to know a person.
Yeah. Try
Yeah.
to get to know me quickly. So yeah, there it is. Right.
So again, kind of tying to this idea of bringing your full authentic self forward so that you can create a pathway for others to do the same. And then also just this idea of really being an architect in your own life. So I've been talking about the need to break down the barriers between our personal and professional selves in my work with employers. Some people say they are not comfortable with being authentic at work because there are low levels of trust and psychological safety at work. How do you recommend people take steps to bring their more authentic selves into their work lives when there might be concerns about rejection or lack of acceptance? How can leaders be more sensitive to this tension for employees? And Larry, thank you so much for that question. So Larry, when you're responding to this, I'm wondering if you could also tie to the research that Google led around this topic of psychological safety. They found that was the number one factor in terms of a high performing team. So I'll turn it over to you to answer that question.
Yeah, so I appreciate the question, and it's a big question, and that can vary based on work context, the different people involved, the dynamics of different teams that are there. So taking all of those variables into consideration, those are obviously the variables to take into consideration. But within Google's context, psychological safety is a huge factor, and for those that are listening, just having the ability to be comfortable to show up as your authentic self. And then especially when times of tension or challenge or high pressure come up, being able to not only engage in the actual work, but also keep a pulse on how everybody else is doing as human beings. And then also being able to read the room and understand what's happening underneath the conversation. So for example, I may be talking to you right now, but I might be feeling some different things because we got a deadline that's due in an hour or something like that. And we have 4 hours worth of work in order to meet the deadline in an hour. So that creates instant pressure, tensions, et cetera. And so within that, where practical psychological safety comes in, and this is where I think more to the leaders, because they can be the cue to model this, is to be able to have courage to step up and be able to name different tensions that might be floating or the elephants that might be in the room, taking a moment to acknowledge those different things. And even also as a leader, taking responsibility or accountability. If you've set the tone that's not the best for your group or the colleagues to thrive, being able to understand that. Also being a willing listener to those that you're working with around you, and then be willing to adjust and interact in that way. And so those are some practical things that get into it. But other themes and things that I've noticed at Google, and I'll say this too, is that we're all trying to figure it out. All the big tech companies, not just tech, in a number of different industries, we're all trying to figure it out. Especially within the pandemic years that we're here.
Mhm.
But some themes that I have noticed during my experience is a general acknowledgement or coming to the conclusion that the way we work typically is not working. And
Mhm.
so, burning yourself out, burning the candle at both ends, or insert whatever metaphor you like, that just doesn't work.
Yeah.
Then the next thing, emerging themes around belonging, empathy, and compassion. And especially, and this is for me personally, because I'm still learning to the audience members' question. I'm still on my journey to practice showing up and being my authentic self. Because
Mhm.
as a Black man in corporate America, I tend to be, the minority in terms of what I look like, experiences, etc. But I have to reframe that and value my experiences and my history and be able to contribute those things to whatever it is we're trying to do and have the confidence to know that those things will help to add value. And then where that can be complementary is for those that are, I'm working with or sitting across the table from, have that mutual empathy or belonging. And the user manual is like a little way to kind of practically help accelerate that. Those are different ways that we can begin to practically grow in that way. But as I said, we're all on a journey. We're all human beings, and we're learning every day with it.
That piece of psychological safety of not only like really staying tuned in to kind of what's happening underneath the surface, and this and then connecting this to a sense of belonging where everyone feels a sense of belonging, also really speaks to the importance of particularly managers paying attention to who's in the conversation, whose
Mhm.
voice is getting heard, and whose voice maybe is not getting heard. So just ensuring, making paying attention to, are there a couple of people on the team whose voices dominate, and we aren't hearing other voices? So how do we make sure that all voices are being heard as opposed to just a few?
Exactly. Exactly. Yep. Balancing all those variables and also being humble to say, hey, what are my blind spots? Asking people so that you can keep getting better. It's that lifelong learning experience.
So, talk a little bit more, if you would, kind of related to this idea of promoting psychological safety, because we're talking about well being in all dimensions, including mental well being and including a sense of feeling like I belong when I come to work. What are some of those nudges and cues, those environmental prompts? How has Google literally built an environment that supports well being and also curated a culture that supports well being, making it kind of normalizing self care, particularly around mental health, especially in the wake of the pandemic? What are some things that Google has been doing in that space?
Yeah, so we've been busy as well as a bunch of other companies have been trying to navigate this and figure it out with all the variables and changes that come. But I'll summarize it in this way. And I wanted to give a quick shout out to my colleague here at Google, Michelle Kaufman, who's been leading the effort here when it comes to designing the built environment and the atmosphere for how our employees show up. And so I really appreciate the work that she's been doing. But a couple of highlights from it is just acknowledging, especially in this new hybrid work era that we're in, is that on any given day, you'll have people who are in the office, like I'm in right now, at home, like you,
Mhm.
or call it on the go, quote unquote. So either traveling or somewhere, but somewhere in some type of transient state. And within that, because in the old days or the pre-pandemic days, for the most part at Google, most people were in the office. And then if you were not in the office, that's more of an exception situation. And so the priority to make those experiences with work equitable was not as strong as it is now.
Mhm.
So now, given these different environments, plus the different types of work that people do, and for example, those are like deep focus work where it's like heads down, deep concentrating work, collaborative type of work. So two or three people around a whiteboard figuring out something, or like social connection type of work. So, like a sales call or a meet and greet to connect folks, or even laboratory work. There's different types of work that happens, that plus working in these different types of contexts. How might we, is kind of the big question, how might we make the experience the best for all of you in all these different scenarios, regardless of where you are and what type of work you're doing? And so with that, we've done, or Michelle's team has done a number of different experiments when it comes to designing the space, and a few things it's been published out there in different articles, but different team pod concepts, different flexible desking concepts, things like that, to where, because on any given day, depending on what's going on, half your team might be physically with you and the others might be on the screen. And so a number of different designs and concepts around that, even using outdoor spaces in our offices where the weather allows for that. And then beyond that, just general how we work together. So taking walking meetings, for example, encouraging different ways to connect, being flexible with your time, because especially if you're at home, life will tend to, blend in to whatever work happens. So being able to be flexible with that. So those are different examples of some of the things that we're doing. And at the same time, we're still learning. Michelle's team is leading this effort. So
Yeah.
still learning, still experimenting as we go.
Well, I know Google has just, prior to the pandemic, you just really built this whole playground. And in fact, even I recall seeing that you all have not only bikes all over the campus, but you even have these multi-person bikes so that a team can go out on a bike together.
Yes. Yeah. I haven't been on one of those, but yes, I've seen it. I've seen it.
And then also, of course, the food that's available to eat there, just incredibly healthy options for people. But really, whether it's in person or virtual, trying to really create that culture that normalizes well-being. And you've even had some leaders that have stepped out up front around mental health, modeling mental health and taking time off. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So some things that it's been really neat to see is leaders stepping forward, and especially leaders here, senior leaders at Google, because they have, the influence, the platform, the, relational capital, professional capital, however you want to frame that. And they're willing to step into areas that tend to be either silent or even taboo. Really just stepping forward and being a human being. Because yes, we all have our titles, we all have our different roles and what we need to do. But at the end of the day, the common denominator is that we're all human beings. And it's been neat for people, especially during the pandemic times, because all of us were feeling it, for leaders to step forward and say, hey, this is tough. Or, life, different things happen within, their personal lives or home lives that have in turn affected, what's going on at work, and just being willing to share that and being willing to say, hey, I'm going to take some time off and step away for a bit. Hey, here's how we set up the team to make sure stuff keeps moving forward. But by doing that, indirectly gives permission for others to reflect on that, and also be able to step up in that way too, if they need to take a break, need help, additional resources, those types of things. And so it's been really encouraging to be able to see human beings be human beings, is how I think about it.
And even showing emotion. I mean, that's one thing that's
Yep.
really struck me with one of your key leaders there. It's in sharing more openly about mental health, that he's not only been sharing his experiences, but actually showing emotions, and has really giving the pathway for other people to be able to show their emotions as well. So just want to mention, we've got a big, exciting announcement. So I want to make sure that you all hang on to the end so that you can hear this exciting new announcement. But Larry, as we kind of start to come toward the end of our interview here, tell us a little bit about kind of the work that you do with Google in relation to your Hoop Dreams 25 work that you do. And again, around kind of being the architect in our own lives around building well-being for ourselves, but also you do a lot of work with young people, kind of using basketball as an avenue to be able to work with young people. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So real quickly, for our listeners out there, I'm a old college basketball player. I played college ball at the United States Naval Academy. It was a great experience there. But now I've continued to have basketball be in my life. And to your point, I actually work with a lot of young players, youth, high school, college, even a couple players that are playing professionally now. But to your question, when it comes to the sports dimension, as I was reading the book, there's actually a number of nudges and cues that I do in like a practice session or a training, which is pretty neat. It got me thinking about it. But really quick with that, like setting up the space for a practice session. So like either sweeping the floor, setting up the gym, setting up the certain spaces of the gym for certain drills, and then we're going to do scrimmaging exercises over here. If there's a sound system in the gym, turn that on to kind of help the players get that energy for the time that we're about to have. And then with cues, sometimes I'll jump in and participate in different drills, but just engaging different players. So it's a combination of different things that I do in terms of nudges and cues to really help to create an amazing experience for the players or the team that I'm working with. When it comes specifically to my basketball stuff in Google, we actually don't do any collaborations formally with that. I do talk a lot about basketball at work. My coworkers probably get bugged about that, but yeah, this is largely I call it my unplugged time to be able to stay active, to have fun, and to be able to spend time with up and coming players on their journeys.
And it looks like, can you share any best practices to encourage well-being and increase engagement for fully remote teams? Question that just came in from Nathan. Thank you, Nathan.
Yeah, thank you for that, Nathan. I would say there are a bunch of different digital resources that are out there. So I would Google different types of routines, practices that are either live things that your team can do together, or you can do asynchronously. And then one other thing that I'm thinking of, and this is an example from a good coworker, a friend of mine in the Google Tokyo office. His name is Suji Kakawa, and he's actually visually impaired. And this is a powerful thing when I went over there to travel to meet with him once. Every afternoon, one thing that he does is he has, and I actually got it right here, these are little stretchy bands. And every afternoon, I think it's like 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, what he will do is he'll start by doing a series of these different stretching exercises, and he just does it from his desk. And granted, this is pre-pandemic times when everybody was in the office. He would stand up and do it, and everybody knew what the routine was because everybody had these bands. Mm-hmm. And everybody would stand up, and they'll be ready for his routine. And he would start doing the different stretching exercises, and whoever could see him would just mimic the exercises. And then whoever could see them would mimic the exercises. And so it literally would spread around the entire floor, whether you could see him or not. And that was the, nudging the cue to be able to give people that quick little well-being break with some simple stretches. And so to the question, that's another little thing that you can do. Something as simple as these little stretchy bands, you can get them anywhere. You can just lead little things like that. In his example, that took 5 minutes, and then everybody's refreshed, and then everybody goes back to work with what they're doing. But a shout out to you, Suji, for that great practice.
And just also the power of starting a movement, that we think so often in terms of programs, but people really want to feel like that they're part of a movement. We got somebody here, love the mimic exercise, how these things can really it can move virally through an entity, through a team, through an organization. So Larry, can you give us top 3 takeaways? And as we come to the final part of our half hour here together around this idea of designing nudges and cues, what can people be thinking about as individuals, as teams, and as organizations?
Yeah, to sum it up, I would say 3 things. The first thing is set the space, and that space can be physical, digital, virtual, relational, but set the space. The second thing is to set the example as the leader or as the person or as the participant, set the example. And then the last thing is to be consistent. Not every day is going to be the same, but that should be more of the exception rather than the norm. So set the space, set the example, be consistent.
I love that. And, you know, I often remind managers that it's those little things and, you know, like this mimic exercise. If you practice it, it may seem kind of inconsequential. It's only 5 minutes. But if that's practiced regularly over time, those little seemingly insignificant rituals really can make a difference.
Yeah. And
So
people look forward to it too. And so
yeah. And
people are
it's
like,
kind of
yes, it's coming.
it's this sense of you kind of in this little oasis of well-being that we can all create, whether it's in person together or virtually. So Larry, I want to say thank you so much for being our amazing guest today. And just want to make the exciting announcement that we've got a new course that's just come out called Got Engagement. And we've got a special on that. And AJ can put that up in the chat there so that you can launch that. But for the next 48 hours, we've got a special on that. And so I encourage you to participate in that. Larry, you were an amazing guest. Thank you so much. And tell us really quickly how people can follow you, how people can stay in touch with you.
Yeah. So for those that are watching, my LinkedIn profile is definitely a good place. Also, my website, so larrygreen.info. And then on the sports side of the house, my sports website is www.hoopdreams25.com.
Awesome. Larry, thank you so much for being the guest today. You were amazing. Great discussion here about designing nudges and cues. Thank you to everybody who joined us. We will look forward to seeing you again December 14th. My guest will be Ron Getzel from Johns Hopkins. We'll be talking about the idea of measuring impact as in launch and iterate. So until then, thank you all so much for joining. Larry, thanks again for being my guest.
Yeah.
Take care, everybody.